Hi, good afternoon and welcome to the University of Northampton. My name's Deborah Gardner and I'm one of the lecturers on the Business Management programme here at the University of Northampton. Joining me is the programme leader, Louise Atkinson.
Hello.
Great to have you here with us, so thanks for joining. As mentioned already on the communications that have gone out, we're both here today to talk to you about the programme. So it's the BA Honours in Business Management. We're going to give you a bit of an insight into what you would learn, one of the subjects that you would learn about as part of the programme, and then talk to you a bit later on about the programme itself, what's involved, how you would learn, module content and things like that. So we'll get started, make a start on the topic for today, which is social responsibility in the supply of goods. A really current topic in the world of business, in the world of business management. You can't really work in the world of business without having an awareness of being socially responsible, being aware of that responsibility that organisations carry in terms of how they produce their goods, how they provide their services, but also how they organise their supply chains. Now, that might be a domestic supply chain, but more often than not for these, particularly for these huge corporations, big multinationals, they are managing a global supply chain network. And so we're going to talk to you today about how these big MNCs can manage that global supply chain network and be as socially responsible as they can be in terms of that management. So as I've said, we're going to be talking to you about the supply of goods. So where do goods come from exactly? Sometimes when we go to various supermarkets, different retailers on the high street, we just, we buy things, but we're not really aware all the time of where these products have come from, where they've been made before making their way to the shelves in the shops.
I have a great example, if I may share,
Yeah, go
Deborah.
for it. Yeah.
So our lack of awareness was really highlighted to me in a class quite a while back, and I had some international students from China who had spent the weekend in London, and one of them wore an I Love London top, and she was really, really pleased with her top. And we were talking about something like this in our session, and I got her friend to check the label because she thought she'd bought a London souvenir, and in the label it said made in China. She was so disappointed, yeah. Bless her.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Yeah, and that's similar with many products that we are buying, like I say, both in shops but also online, and we don't necessarily give it too much thought about where these products are made, what has been the route from manufacturing or sourcing the raw materials for those products to the final product then that ends up in our homes and with us as the consumer. So we're going to be thinking about that. We're also going to be looking at how an organisation can be more sustainable in the supply of goods from around the world. What business practices should they be looking to adopt to try and be more sustainable, be more environmentally friendly, be more community focused. And then I'm going to talk to you about a couple of organisations that you will probably have heard of. So the first being Apple and the second being Marks and Spencer's. So two different products that they sell, obviously. I'm going to talk to you about some examples from their sustainable supply chain management. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, just talking to you about what a global supply chain is and what a supply chain is. So a supply chain includes all of the raw materials and parts that go into making the final product. It can be a range of different materials, obviously depending on the product that the organisation is making. Coming from different sectors, coming from different, you've got the primary sector, producing raw materials such as the wood, the coal,
farming.
Yeah, farming, agriculture. So lots of different sectors involved in the raw materials and the production of those materials. And then the product is eventually manufactured and it's distributed up the chain. So it's called the supply chain because it progresses in stages. And then it's manufactured and then eventually it's sold via various retailers and distributors. So a global supply chain is, as the name suggests, where the companies that are involved in making those products have various factories, outlets, also retail outlets in different countries. So obviously that brings with it a whole host of additional challenges and things that need to be considered in terms of managing that supply chain. When you've got an organisation with factories and retail outlets based in lots of different countries, they are obviously then susceptible to more difficulties that need to be managed in terms of their supply chain. So as Louise mentioned, you know, we perhaps don't always give it too much thought about where these products are made. We might even think that some of the products that we buy in our own countries are made in our own countries, but that is absolutely not always the case. So there's some labels there on the screen that you can see, just stating where a lot of the products are made. Obviously here in the UK, we have British retailers and some of their products will be made in the UK, but more often than not, for various reasons, a lot of the manufacturing processes have been outsourced and set up in a lot of Asian countries. So China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan, and also then in other countries, you've got Turkey there, but also, you know, there are some US retailers similar to the UK where they are making products in their own domestic market. So products coming from lots of different countries around the world. And like I say, then presenting organisations with some problems.
I think it's also really important to perhaps just take a moment to think about what goods and services we might associate with different countries. So, for example, if I say Germany, I would imagine some of you may already be thinking about engines, cars, and the strength of the industry around car production in Germany. Whereas if I say, I don't know, think of a country for me, Deborah.
Italy and clothes.
Italy, yes,
fashion.
high fashion and beautiful suits, absolutely. So when we think about different countries, often we think about different products or services that they're good at. Another one that I often think about is that there is a strong service-based knowledge around technology in India, for example.
Yeah.
So when we have countries that are really, really good at particular industries, you may find that the supply chains will lean towards those countries because they have a level of knowledge or potentially an advantage over other countries in that particular space.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Louise. So I've mentioned obviously the global supply chain, and one of the biggest challenges that presents to the organisations is transportation. And this then starts us thinking along the lines of the sustainability aspect of a global supply chain. Obviously, if you have a retailer, an organisation in one country, but their manufacturing facilities are in a different country, then somehow the products need to be transported from one to the other, and potentially then also transported again to reach the final consumer, reach the final retailer. So all of these methods of transport that you can see on the screen, they are obviously very high users of energy and fuel sources, which, if you look at it, they are expensive and they are not always environmentally friendly. So they are huge users of non-renewable sources of energy, which unfortunately means that the global supply chain is not always reaching its sustainability goals. And as I mentioned, a lot of international, multinational organisations will be using these methods of transportation. So we have seen in recent years that some companies are deciding to they're deciding to deglobalize, go more local in terms of their global supply chain, to try and cut down on their use of non-renewable sources of energy. It's something that organisations, like I say, are looking into, but it's a bit of a balancing act between the benefits of moving some of their supply chains into certain countries, and then potentially then not benefiting from the fact that they are quite far away. And I'll go into that a bit more very shortly. So what does it mean to be sustainable in a supply chain? Well, what it means is that it means that the organisation has the ability to maintain a process over a continuous period of time. It means that they are not exhausting the planet's resources. So it means that they are not causing harm or leading to the depletion of some of our planet's resources. And that could be energy, raw materials. It means that they are trying to promote the circular economy. And within that, we mean things like reusing, recycling, reducing the use of some of these resources.
Just to connect the circular economy, not everyone may have heard of that.
True.
The circular economy concept is around keeping products active within the supply chain for the longest period possible, either in their original form, their manufactured form, or their remanufactured form. And I have to say, I believe that we're really starting to see circular economy thinking in our everyday lives. So I'm now a real fan of Vinted, and I've heard of Depop. My kids buy from these sites, and they've got me buying from them too, because it enables people to make a bit of money on their old clothes. But perhaps more importantly, it means that good quality clothing remains active in the supply chain at the level of the consumer. So we as individuals have a level of control over sustainability in our supply chains too.
Yeah, and one of the ones that always comes up in some of my sessions that a lot of the students are aware of is the scheme at H&M, where you can take along old clothing, and I think you deposit a bag full of clothes for it to be recycled and kept within the economy and the process. And I think you get paid £5 per bag.
You get a £5 voucher on your new purchase.
Yeah, exactly. So again, a lot of organisations are giving much more consideration to this topic, much more than they ever used to. Because I think as consumers, like you say, you're more aware of it, Louise. I'm certainly more aware of it. And the general public, I think, is more aware of it. And so they're demanding a certain level of awareness from the organisations, and a certain level of service, a certain business practice to be implemented, so that, like you say, goods remain in the system, that we're not just producing new things all the time.
And the exciting thing is that it's supported by numerous stakeholders. So, for example, the legislation recently passed that ensures that things are made to be fixed rather than disposed of, which is a good step forward in encouraging manufacturers to build longevity into their products.
Yeah, quite a good definition there at the bottom of the screen that you'll see. So this was something that was a definition that was presented by the United Nations when they came up with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs. And it says, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And basically that means that as citizens of the world right now, we aren't putting in jeopardy the future lives of future generations, basically, and making sure that there are sufficient resources, both raw materials, energy, methods of manufacturing that can continue into the future, so that the planet continues. It's not particularly thriving right now, but so that the planet survives ultimately. And obviously, we have seen over the years that a lot of damage has been done to the planet, and so it's really important that that the figures start to improve, that we are improving our carbon emissions, that we are offsetting our carbon emissions, and that as I said, that the future generations can have somewhere to live and somewhere to kind of, obviously thrive themselves. So supply chain sustainability is bringing together those two ideas, the idea of the supply chain and then the idea of sustainability, matching them both up and making sure that the supply chain, the global network, the global supply chain is sustainable, and that organizations are coming up with their different ideas so that the manufacturing process that they employ is sustainable, that it continues, and that the goods and services can continue to be produced and offered, whilst considering the three main aspects, which you can see highlighted there, and they are environmental, social, and economic. And what this means is that, yes, ultimately, all businesses really, they are in business to produce, to make a profit. Yeah, they want to make money. They obviously are very concerned with their bottom line, and they are aware that that is a priority for some stakeholders, obviously mostly the shareholders, but that also other stakeholders need to be considered and are of equal importance. So the social aspect is linked to different stakeholders such as the community, the general public, the employees of the organisation, the suppliers of the organisation, and making sure that the human aspect of business is considered and is at the forefront of decisions that are made by these organisations. So again, there's lots of initiatives that different organisations are taking. There's a website, actually. I know we all generally go to Google when we want to know something and find something out, but there's actually a website called Ecosia. And Ecosia, when you search for Ecosia and it comes up, it's a search engine similar to Google, but they pledge that for every search that is undertaken on their search engine, they promise to plant a new tree. So again, these organisations are thinking about these initiatives that they can do in order to try and be more green, be more environmentally conscious, be aware of the fact, like I said earlier, as consumers, we are demanding these things are in place. And it does, it has an impact on where we decide to shop, who we decide to, buy our products from, and who we decide to use for different services that we want to benefit from. So lots of different aspects that need to be considered, and those are the three main: the environmental, the social, and the economic aspects in terms of the global supply chains. And I just wanted to bring in some theory here. So as part of the degree programme, one of the main, or not the main, but one of the aspects that is covered as soon as you arrive as a first year on the programme is some theory to really underpin the learning that you are doing here at the university. And I wanted to talk to you all about the theory, which is called the triple bottom line theory. And basically the way that works, as I mentioned earlier, you have organisations that previously have always focused on their bottom line, which is that they want to make a profit. And John Elkington in 1994, he introduced the triple bottom line theory, which means that organisations need to focus on three areas, which I've mentioned being economic, environmental, and social. So this really is to just demonstrate that this isn't just something that organisations have come up with. There is a theory that relates to this concept of being more socially aware, more environmentally aware, and then also providing economic value to shareholders. And the fact that then that is underpinned by theory just kind of cements that knowledge really, and cements the fact that this is it's worthwhile. It's successful, it's been proven to create value for all stakeholders. And as I mentioned, a lot more organisations are shifting away now from purely being in business to make money. You can go on the websites of nearly all bigger organisations these days, and there will be some information on there about how they are addressing the issue of sustainability, how they are addressing the issue of supply chain management, how they are addressing the issue of being carbon neutral. Many of them are have specific targets in place, and that will then come under the environmental awareness. So just to reiterate, really, that there is theory out there that really supports these concepts. So various things that can be done. We've talked already about the circular economy, so reducing, reusing and recycling. Mentioned H&M. Louise mentioned a couple of the what's it called, nearly new websites. So Vinted has become really popular. I think eBay do a similar sort of thing these days, where eBay obviously is a lot of used products already, but they do something where you can exchange things rather than just buying. So again, just looking to minimize waste all the time. And all of that then obviously comes under the circular economy. Avoiding unnecessary stockpiling is also a way of achieving sustainability in your supply chain. Obviously, if you are heavily loaded with goods, it's going to cost money and use resources, use energy to store those items. So a lot of manufacturing companies have adopted the just-in-time technique, so that products are arriving just in time in order for them then to be sold. Obviously, that does bring with it some challenges as well. And we've seen quite recently various issues with transportation challenges and what was the one? The Suez Canal. And the Suez Canal, there was a blockage in the Suez Canal, and it led to a shipment containing huge amounts of products and parts and components that were being shipped all around the world for various organisations. Obviously, when there's a blockage and things can't pass through smoothly, then organisations ultimately are losing money when that sort of thing happens. So on the one hand, it's great not to stockpile and you're not using unnecessary resources, but obviously if you are employing a just-in-time manufacturing technique and program, you just need to be aware that there will be some challenges along the way, particularly with the transportation of your goods.
Can I just say as well, with the circular economy, whilst it does have a level of concentration on the production and distribution of goods, it's also the way that they are made. So the energy sources of manufacturing. I listened to a professor speaking about research around using heated bricks to convert to energy in a production unit, because production units are typically another massive source of CO2 emissions. So it's interesting to hear current research that's happening around ways that we can be more sustainable, not just in the goods we're producing, but in the energy consumption and the manner in which they are produced. So the circular economy thinks about those elements too. Reducing water in production has been incredibly I suppose, incredibly important to some organisations, and Coca-Cola have a great example of how appalling they were to where they are today, which is much, much better in terms of producing their drinks. It used to be some years ago that it would take 3 litres of water to produce 1 litre of Coca-Cola. And they've made huge inroads through their development to reduce that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're a very good example. And I think they've also set up water conservation areas, haven't they, in certain countries, to try and sort of, again, give back to the community. And so a lot more organisations becoming aware of the necessity for this. On the social side, so again, we have quite a few examples of organisations that have been in the press for negative reasons in terms of their workforce and not necessarily always looking after their workforce in the best way. So the one that I'm thinking of is Nike. And yeah, they were in the press. It was a little while ago now, but we all probably read about the sweatshops that they were using in Asia. Again, there was the reports of them employing quite young children, obviously not paying them a huge amount of money, paying them quite pittance, to be honest. The working conditions that the children were working in, and adults, were not very good at all. So quite dirty working conditions. And as I say, they weren't being rewarded justly for their work. Something else that it needs to be considered is the issue of maternity and paternity pay. So again, looking at it from a social point of view, and gender equality, it's always previously been that if the mother takes the time off work after having a child, would always receive more maternity leave than the father. Whereas a lot of organisations nowadays are trying to make that a bit more equal, to try and really build up their gender equality.
I think as well with labour conditions, we always assume that improvements are needed overseas, but actually in the UK we do have major issues with modern slavery, and it doesn't take long to find examples. I think it's also helpful to look at good and bad examples, and popularly Primark was held up as a bad example for a long time, but I like to hold them up as a good example. If any of you remember the Rana Plaza fire in their manufacturing unit, in their production unit, you'll know that it was absolutely horrific. And along with other retailers, Primark was vilified for having chosen this particular supplier to produce their goods, because workers were locked in, and that's why so many people died in that fire. But rather than try to dismiss, sugarcoat, cover up, Primark actually set up a fund, a relief fund, and they worked really, really hard with the community in that area. And they now provide education, healthcare. They teach people, women particularly, because it is predominantly women working on producing the clothing, how to manage money and how to be more sustainable in the way that they live. They do an awful lot of good work, and that has continued since. So what was a horrific event actually resulted in a really positive long-term improvement for that community and for those workers, and it carries on across other areas and other suppliers for the company as well.
Yeah, good. I've already talked about the targets that organisations have set themselves, and a lot of these are national targets as well. So the governments of many countries, if not all countries now, have that target to try and be carbon neutral by a particular year. I think 2050 stands out as a bit of a target for a lot of countries and organisations. So trying to use more carbon neutral energy sources, making greater use of solar and wind power. Obviously, we all are aware of the Tesla as a kind of beacon, if you like, trying to reduce their own carbon footprint. Lots of organisations following suit, making more use of EVs. And yeah, just like I say, trying to reduce their use of non-renewable sources of energy.
And just if you are interested in your own carbon footprint, you can look this up on a calculator. So the website is carbon-calculator.climatehero.org, and that will take you through a series of questions about your lives today, and it will give you an idea of the carbon footprint that you and your household are creating. So perhaps a bit of homework to try and bring that down by the time September rolls around.
And I think it's probably quite surprising sometimes, the small things that you can do in your own everyday lives that will eventually make a difference, on a bigger scale. Louise